The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when most of the city is asleep. The streetlights painted long shadows on the pavement outside a tall glass building, and the only sound was the steady hum of traffic far away. At the main gate stood a security guard in a faded uniform. His cap was slightly tilted and his eyes looked tired but calm. He had worked this night shift for years, watching people come and go, guarding a place that never really slept. Every evening he arrived a little early, wiping dust off the guard's desk and making sure the kettle had enough water. He liked things neat. The guardhouse was small, barely enough for one chair, a thermos, and a few old magazines. Yet it was his space, his little corner of the world. He often said that a job is not about how big the office is, but how honestly one does it. Most people didn't really notice him. The employees of the building passed him every morning with half-awake faces, their eyes fixed on their phones. Some nodded politely. Most didn't, but he never minded. He knew everyone had their own worries. He would just smile and say his usual line, "Good morning, sir," or "Take care, miss," with a gentle nod. It was his small way of showing respect. The guard wasn't a man of many words, but people who took the time to talk to him always felt lighter afterward. Maybe it was his calm voice or the way he listened without interrupting. He had a gift for making others feel seen. He didn't know that his quiet kindness would one day reach millions. That evening, the rain started early. It wasn't a soft drizzle, it came down hard, the kind of rain that soaks you in seconds. The guard watched as the parking lot began to flood. He pulled his jacket tighter and looked out through the gate. It was nearly midnight when he noticed a delivery van stop near the entrance. The driver jumped out, struggling to keep a large cardboard box dry. His clothes were already drenched. He ran to the side door, pressed the intercom, but no one answered. The office inside was closed for the night. The guard stepped out of his small booth and waved. "They're gone for the day," he said gently. The driver looked defeated, holding the box close to his chest. "I was told to deliver this before midnight," the man said, his voice breaking from frustration. "It's important. I've been on the road since morning." The guard thought for a moment. "Come in under the shed," he said, opening the gate halfway. "At least don't stand in the rain." The driver hesitated, then nodded and stepped inside. The guard took out his old umbrella, one side slightly bent, and held it over the man as they walked toward the small guard room. The man's shoes squeaked with every step. The guard motioned for him to sit on the chair while he poured hot water into 2 metal cups. He always kept tea leaves in a small jar, his nightly comfort during long shifts. "Here," he said, handing the cup over. "Warm up a little. The rain will calm soon." The driver held the cup between his shaking hands, steam rising into his tired face. "You didn't have to," he murmured. The guard smiled. "It's just tea. Everyone deserves one after a long day." They sat there quietly, listening to the rain drum against the roof. The driver talked about his work, how deliveries had increased, how the pay wasn't enough, and how his little daughter waited for him every night to bring home bread from the bakery near his last stop. The guard listened, nodding. He didn't interrupt. He understood what it meant to work hard and still feel like it wasn't enough. "You remind me of myself some years back," the guard said softly. "Things were tough then too, but somehow good days always came, even if a little late." The driver looked up, surprised at how much comfort that simple line gave him. The warmth from the tea and the stranger's kindness eased the heaviness in his chest. After a while, the rain slowed. The guard checked his watch. "You can leave the parcel with me. I'll make sure the staff inside gets it first thing in the morning." The driver looked relieved. "Are you sure? I don't want you to get in trouble." "It's all right," the guard said. "Sometimes you just have to trust people." The driver smiled for the first time that night. He placed the box on the counter, thanked the guard, and walked toward his van. The guard followed him with the umbrella until he was safely inside. Before leaving, the driver rolled down his window. "I don't know your name, sir, but thank you. Not many people would stop to help a stranger." The guard gave a small wave. "Take care of yourself. Roads are slippery tonight." The van drove off into the misty darkness, leaving behind a faint glow of headlights that disappeared into the rain. The guard walked back to his booth, folded the wet umbrella, and poured himself another cup of tea. To him, it was just another night. He didn't think much of it, but a young woman standing under a nearby bus stop had seen the whole thing. She had been waiting for her ride, drenched, holding her phone. Without realizing it, she had captured the short moment on video. The guard shielding the driver, the small gesture of tea. and the quiet smile that passed between two tired men. She uploaded it later that night with a short caption, "Kindness still exists." By the next morning, the video had been shared hundreds of times. People commented how it reminded them of their fathers, grandfathers, and kind strangers they once met. The clip spread fast, faster than the woman ever expected. Meanwhile, the guard arrived at work again, unaware that the world had started noticing him. He greeted people at the gate as usual. A few smiled more warmly than usual that morning. One of the office workers even brought him a cup of coffee, saying she saw him online. He didn't understand what she meant until another guard showed him the video on his phone. At first, he laughed. "That's me? Oh no, my umbrella looks broken in that video," he said shyly. But then he read the comments. Hundreds of strangers thanking him, calling him an example of humanity. He couldn't believe it. He kept repeating the same thing. "I only shared tea. That's all," but it wasn't just tea. It was kindness at a time when people had started forgetting what kindness looked like. That evening, when he went home, his wife noticed something different in his expression. "You seem lighter today," she said while serving dinner. He smiled, shaking his head. "Nothing big. Just a small thing at work." Later, as he sat outside his small house under the same old umbrella, he looked up at the cloudy sky. He had never thought of himself as special. He just believed that life was hard enough for everyone, and a bit of kindness could make it softer. He didn't know yet that this small act would travel far beyond that rainy night. He didn't know that people across the world would soon learn his name, that his simple smile would make strangers reflect on their own choices, that his story would become a reminder that good still exists in small corners, at gates, in teacups, and in hearts that expect nothing in return. That night, as the rain began again, he stayed at his post, watching the city lights flicker in puddles. The air smelled fresh, and somewhere deep inside he felt a quiet peace. He didn't need the world to notice. He only hoped that maybe, just maybe, someone out there would pass on a little kindness too. The next morning began like any other. The guard woke up early, long before the sun came out. His old alarm clock rang sharply, and he silenced it with one tired hand. He washed his face with cold water, buttoned his uniform, and tied his shoes carefully. His wife handed him a small lunchbox with a smile. "Don't forget to eat today," she said softly. He nodded, kissed her forehead, and stepped out into the cool air. He had no idea that while he was going about his usual routine, his life had already started to change. By the time he reached the gate, the sky had turned bright orange. He liked that part of the morning, the silence just before the world got busy. The city slowly woke up, and soon cars began passing by. He stood at his post as usual, greeting everyone who entered the building. But something felt different. People were looking at him longer than usual. Some smiled wider. Others whispered to each other after passing through the gate. He noticed it but didn't ask. Maybe he had done something wrong, he thought. Maybe his cap was crooked. Around mid-morning, one of the young office workers stopped near the gate holding a cup of coffee. "Sir, I saw your video last night," she said with excitement. He frowned slightly. "Video? What video?" She laughed and held up her phone. "You helped that delivery man in the rain, remember? Someone recorded it. It's all over social media now. You're famous." He blinked, unsure what to say. He took a step closer and looked at the screen. There he was, holding the umbrella, handing tea to the driver. The clip wasn't even a minute long, but the comments below it seemed endless. People from different countries were leaving messages, some in languages he didn't even understand. They called him a real hero, a kind soul, the man with the golden heart. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. "I just did what anyone would do," he said quietly, but the young woman shook her head. "No, sir. Not everyone does that anymore." When she left, he stood still for a long time. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but disbelief. He had spent years doing the same job, unnoticed by almost everyone. And now, one small act had suddenly made him the center of attention. He didn't know how to feel about it. By afternoon, more people came to the gate, smiling and thanking him. A few even asked to take pictures. Some said his kindness made them cry. Others said they shared the video with their families. The company's manager came down from the office, shook his hand, and said proudly, "You made us all look good." The guard blushed and looked down, not used to such praise. When his shift ended that day, he walked home slowly, trying to process everything. He stopped by a small tea stall on the way where he often rested. The shopkeeper had already seen the video too. "Ah, you're the famous guard now," he said cheerfully. "Your face is everywhere. People need more stories like yours." The guard smiled shyly and sipped his tea. It tasted the same as always, but something inside him felt different, like his quiet world had suddenly become louder. That night, his children showed him the video again on their phones. They couldn't stop smiling. "Papa, look at all these people." "They're saying you're an inspiration." His wife sat beside him watching quietly. He glanced at her and said softly, "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just didn't want that man to stand in the rain." She placed her hand on his arm. "You've always helped people. It's just that now the world saw it. That's all." Over the next few days, the video spread even more. News channels picked it up and reporters started showing up at the building where he worked. Cameras flashed as he walked to his post. One of the journalists asked him, "Sir, how does it feel to be a hero?" He looked at them, unsure how to answer. "I'm not a hero," he said simply. "I just think kindness should be normal." People loved his honesty. His words were shared again and again. Memes and captions appeared online, using his quote as a reminder that good deeds don't need to be big to matter. His face became a symbol of hope in a world that often felt cold. At first, all the attention made him nervous. He wasn't used to being surrounded by cameras or strangers calling his name. He still took his job seriously, checking IDs, keeping records, opening gates. But now people actually greeted him back. They brought him food, tea, and even gifts. A local bakery sent boxes of biscuits to the security booth with a note that said, "For the kind man at the gate." One day, the delivery driver from that rainy night returned. He came carrying a small box of sweets. "Sir," he said with a wide smile, "I wanted to thank you properly. You didn't just help me. You helped me believe there are still good people in this world." The guard shook his hand firmly and smiled. "You didn't have to bring this. Your words are enough." But the driver insisted. "You changed my week, maybe even my life." They shared another cup of tea together just like that night, this time under clear skies. A few passers-by recognized them and took pictures again. The guard sighed with gentle amusement. "Seems like we're famous now," he said jokingly. The driver laughed. "Yes, sir. But I think people needed this story. Everyone's tired of bad news." At home, the guard began receiving letters. Some came from faraway towns, written by school children who had learned about him in class. One letter said, "Sir, because of you, we started a kindness challenge in our school." Another read, "You reminded my dad to be kind again." He kept all the letters neatly in an old box near his bed. They reminded him that small acts could ripple farther than he could imagine. Despite all the love and attention, he stayed humble. He still took the same bus to work, wore the same uniform, and carried the same old umbrella. He didn't let fame change his routine. In fact, he tried to stay out of the spotlight as much as possible. Whenever someone tried to make a big deal out of it, he would simply smile and say, "Let's just try to be kind to each other." That's enough. The company's management noticed how people admired him. They decided to feature him in their annual newsletter as an example of dedication and humanity. His story reached even more people. A few community organizations invited him to speak at schools, but he politely refused. "I'm not good with speeches," he would say. "I'm better at just doing my work." One rainy evening, similar to the night when it all began, he sat alone in his guardroom. He watched the drops slide down the glass window and thought about how strange life could be. One moment you're invisible. The next everyone knows your name. But he didn't crave attention. What made him happiest was seeing how his small act had inspired others. Every day now he noticed people being kinder, offering to carry things for others, sharing umbrellas, greeting each other more warmly. Maybe that was his real reward. As the rain grew heavier, he stepped outside to adjust the gate. A group of office workers ran toward their cars, laughing as they got wet. One of them paused and called out, "Sir, you're the reason I started smiling at strangers again." "Thank you." He chuckled, raising his hand in return. The rain didn't bother him anymore. It reminded him of that first night, of how something so ordinary had turned into something beautiful. By the time his shift ended, the streets were quiet again. He walked home slowly, his reflection following him in the puddles. He didn't think of himself as special, just lucky that the world had chosen to notice one simple moment of kindness. He hoped it would remind people that compassion doesn't need a reason or a stage. It just needs a heart. When he reached home, his wife was waiting by the door with a towel and a smile. "Another busy day, my famous husband?" she teased. He laughed softly. "Nothing special," he said, hanging his wet jacket. "Just doing what I always do." But deep down, he knew that something had changed, not just for him, but for everyone who had watched that small act of kindness and remembered what it meant to be human. The guard's life had changed in quiet but noticeable ways. Weeks had passed since his video spread across the internet, and yet people still came by the gate to see him. Some brought flowers, some brought letters, and others just wanted to shake his hand. He accepted every greeting with a shy smile and the same calmness he always carried. But deep inside, he still couldn't understand why people were making such a big deal out of what he thought was just a normal act. The world outside saw a hero, but inside, he still saw a man who worked long hours to feed his family. He didn't crave attention. All he ever wanted was peace, a simple life where he could do his duty and go home to his loved ones. Yet, something about the way people reacted made him realize that maybe the world really was craving kindness. Maybe people had forgotten how powerful it could be. One afternoon, a reporter came to meet him again. She wasn't like the usual kind who rushed for headlines. She sat beside him near the guardroom and asked softly, "You've been inspiring people for weeks now. Can you tell me where this kindness comes from?" He looked away for a moment, his eyes on the dusty road outside. The question took him back years, back to a time when life had been much harder. "There was a time," he began slowly, "when I didn't have a job. I used to stand outside buildings like this one, hoping someone would give me work. Days went by and no one did. One evening I was hungry, tired, and ready to give up. Then an old man from a small shop nearby called me over and gave me a plate of food. I tried to pay him with the few coins I had, but he refused. He said, 'Keep it. Someday, when you're in a better place, help someone else.'" He paused for a moment, his voice softer now. "That night I promised myself I would never forget what that man did for me. I guess that promise never left me." The reporter's eyes filled with emotion as she listened. "So your kindness started with someone else's kindness?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, I just passed it forward." That small interview aired on television the next evening. People learned that the humble security guard who had become famous for sharing tea once knew what it felt like to be helpless himself. His story touched even more hearts. Comments poured in. Some said they cried, others said they felt inspired to do something good. Schools began using his words in morning assemblies. Children drew pictures of him holding an umbrella. Even teachers told their students, kindness doesn't need money, just a good heart. At work, things also began to change. The office staff, who once hurried past him, now stopped to chat for a few minutes every day. Some shared their own stories with him. Others asked for advice. He never gave long speeches, just short, thoughtful replies that somehow stayed with people. "Always leave others a little happier than you found them," he once told a young worker who was going through a tough time. The worker smiled, saying he would never forget those words. The guard had become more than a symbol. He had become a quiet teacher. Without realizing it, he had started to change the environment around him. The building where he worked didn't feel so cold anymore. People smiled more, greeted each other kindly, and helped one another without being asked. His example had created a small wave of warmth that spread through the entire workplace. But fame also brought small challenges. Some people questioned if he was pretending to be humble for attention. Others made fun of the idea that a simple act could matter so much. The guard heard some of these things, but he never let them affect him. "People will always have opinions," he told his wife one night as they ate dinner. "But I know what I did, and I know why I did it." "That's enough." His wife nodded, proud of the quiet strength in her husband. "You don't need to explain kindness," she said. "It speaks for itself." One day, while on duty, a group of school children visited the building for a project. Their teacher told the guard they had come to meet him because they'd studied his story in class. The children surrounded him, full of energy, holding notebooks and tiny cameras. One girl asked, "Sir, why do you always smile at everyone even when they don't smile back?" He chuckled softly and said, "Because one day they might. And if they don't, that's all right too. My smile doesn't depend on theirs." The children clapped, and one of them handed him a small card that said, "Thank you for reminding us to be kind." He held the card carefully, touched by the thought. After they left, he pinned it to the wall of his guard room beside the old calendar and a few family photos. He looked at it often during long nights when the world outside felt heavy and still. More people started inviting him to community events. He attended a few, speaking in his simple way. "I don't have big words," he told a group of students once. "I just know that helping someone doesn't make you poor. It makes you rich in peace." The crowd applauded, not because the words were fancy, but because they were true. Despite all the recognition, the guard's daily routine didn't change. He still brought his own lunch, brewed tea in his small kettle, and kept his uniform neat. He continued treating everyone the same way, whether it was the company's CEO or a cleaner passing by. People respected that about him. He didn't let fame climb into his head. He was still the same man who stood at the gate with patience and humility. One evening, he noticed a young janitor struggling with a heavy trash bin. Without a second thought, he walked over to help. The janitor was surprised. "Sir, you don't have to," he began, but the guard interrupted gently. "Why not? Work is work. We all have our part." Together, they pushed the bin to the corner. The young man smiled, saying he'd never been helped by a senior staff member before. The guard just shrugged. "We're all the same when we care," he said quietly. That small moment reminded everyone watching that his kindness wasn't just for the camera, it was real. It was part of who he was. Later that night, as he sat by the gate under the glow of a streetlight, he thought about everything that had happened. He remembered the old man from his past, the rainy night with the driver and all the people who had reached out since then. He didn't feel famous, he felt grateful. Life had been kind to him in its own quiet way, returning what he had once given without expecting anything back. The guard's story wasn't about being perfect. He had his struggles too, late hours, back pain, and days when he missed family gatherings because of work. But he never complained. He often said, "If we keep waiting for big chances to do good, we'll miss the small ones right in front of us." That became one of his most shared quotes online. As weeks turned into months, the building where he worked slowly transformed. A small notice board appeared near the entrance with the title, "Kindness Wall." Employees pinned notes about good deeds, helping a coworker, feeding a stray dog, donating books. The guard's story had sparked something much bigger than himself. His name might fade one day, but the kindness he inspired would not. That night, when he locked the gate, he looked around at the quiet street and smiled to himself. He didn't need applause or fame. The real reward was seeing how one small act, born from a simple heart, could change so many lives. He whispered softly, maybe that old man from years ago would be proud. And as he walked home under the streetlights, carrying his lunchbox and old umbrella, he realized something beautiful. Kindness wasn't just something you gave. It was something that kept you alive from the inside out. The days kept moving forward, but the story of the kind security guard continued to live in people's hearts. What had started as a small video on social media had now turned into something much bigger. People began calling it the kindness movement. Across towns, schools, and workplaces, others started doing good deeds and sharing them online. Many said they were inspired by the man at the gate who had once shared his umbrella and a cup of tea on a rainy night. The guard didn't know about half of this at first. He still came to work quietly every morning, checked IDs, and greeted everyone with his calm smile. But around him, the world seemed brighter. The office workers who used to walk past him now brought him tea or snacks. Even strangers who visited the building recognized him from the internet. They would say things like, "You're the reason I started being kind again," or, "Your story made me realize how little things matter." One day, a group of college students arrived at the building. They were carrying cameras and notebooks. Their professor had given them a project about human stories that inspired change, and they had chosen to meet him. When they found the guard at his post, they asked politely if he could spare a few minutes. He hesitated at first. He never saw himself as someone worth interviewing, but then he agreed. They asked him simple questions. "Sir, how did your life change after your video went viral?" one of them asked. The guard smiled. "It didn't change too much. I still work, I still go home, and I still drink the same tea. Maybe people changed around me, but I stayed the same." Another student asked, "How do you feel knowing that millions of people look up to you now?" He thought for a while and then said, "It feels strange. I didn't plan for this. I didn't save anyone or build something big. I just did what I thought was right. Maybe people saw a part of themselves in that moment. The students were moved by his words. One of them said softly, "That's exactly what makes you special." They took a few photos, thanked him, and left. Later that week, their interview was posted online, and once again, people were touched by how humble he remained even after all the fame. But what truly surprised him was how far the ripple had gone. He started receiving letters and videos from people he had never met. A teacher from another city wrote to say her students had started a kindness week in school, inspired by him. A group of bus drivers organized a free ride day for elderly passengers. Even a local bakery gave out bread to the homeless every Sunday, calling it the Guard's gift. Each story filled his heart with quiet joy. He couldn't believe one small act had sparked so many others. At work, the company's management decided to honor him with an award. They planned a small ceremony in the building's courtyard. When the day came, the employees clapped as he walked to the stage. He looked uncomfortable with all the attention, but he accepted the award with a warm smile. The manager gave a short speech saying, "You have taught us more about humanity than any training ever could." The guard only replied, "I'm just doing my job, sir." His humility made the crowd applaud even louder. After the event, some reporters tried to get him to talk more about his life, but he always kept his answers short and honest. "Kindness isn't something you talk about," he said once. "It's something you do when no one's watching." That line went viral again. People started quoting it everywhere, on posters in schools and in motivational videos. It became his new identity, the man who believed in silent kindness. Despite the fame, he still lived simply. His house was small but filled with warmth. His wife continued to cook his favorite lentils, and their children helped him check messages from people online. Sometimes he would sit with them in the evening, watching videos sent by strangers. Videos of people helping one another, smiling, sharing food, and spreading positivity. Each time his eyes would soften. "See," he'd say, "goodness never dies. It just waits for someone to wake it up." One evening, a large TV channel contacted him for a special feature. They wanted to make a short documentary about his life. The producer said, "Your story has touched millions. We want people to know the person behind the smile." The guard was unsure at first, but his family encouraged him. "It's not about fame," his wife said gently. "It's about reminding people that kindness still matters." When the documentary aired, it showed his daily life, him opening the gate, greeting workers, helping people cross the wet road, and sitting quietly with his cup of tea. There was nothing dramatic in it, but that simplicity was what made it powerful. The background narration said, "Sometimes, heroes wear uniforms we overlook every day." The video received millions of views within hours. The next morning, when he arrived at work, there were flowers placed near his guardroom. A handwritten note was attached to one bouquet. "Thank you for making us believe in humanity again." He read the note twice, then placed it carefully on his desk. He didn't see himself as a hero, but he couldn't deny that something beautiful had happened through his story. Soon, people in other cities started following his example. Hashtags spread online, encouraging small acts of kindness. People began recording and sharing moments of generosity, helping elders, feeding animals, donating clothes. The world felt a little warmer, a little more connected, all because one quiet man had offered tea to a stranger one rainy night. But while all this was happening, the guard continued to work as he always had. He never let the fame distract him from his duty. He still greeted everyone, opened the gate with the same care, and watched the building lights turn on as evening approached. For him, life's beauty lay in these small, steady routines. One night, as he sat under the dim yellow light of his booth, a young man approached him. He looked nervous, holding a file in his hand. "Sir," he said, "I came here for a job interview today. I was very scared, but then I saw your story online last night. It made me believe I could face today with courage. I just wanted to thank you." The guard smiled kindly. "You don't need to thank me, son. You did your part. You showed up. That's what matters most." The young man smiled back, and for a moment, there was a silent understanding between them. Two ordinary people sharing something human and real. After the man left, the guard sat quietly for a while. The city outside was buzzing, cars passing, lights glowing, but he felt at peace. He realized that kindness wasn't a one-time thing. It was a chain that kept moving from one person to another, growing stronger each time someone chose to care. In the following weeks, the company noticed how much morale had improved. People were more patient, more cooperative, and even the smallest tasks were done with warmth. The management credited the guard for this change, but he never took credit. "It's not me," he said. "It's the kindness itself. Once it starts, it finds its own way." Months passed, and the guard's story continued to circulate online. Celebrities mentioned him in interviews, saying his actions reminded them of their own roots.
Schools began organizing annual Kindness Day events.
A local charity even named a scholarship fund after him, to help children from poor families. Each new thing humbled him deeply. Yet despite all the attention, he remained the same man who once stood quietly in the rain, offering tea to a tired stranger. The fame didn't change his habits, his values, or his way of speaking. He still believed that being good didn't need a stage or an audience. One late evening, as he closed the gate, a cool wind brushed his face. He looked up at the stars, thinking about how everything had started. That simple moment of compassion had grown into something far beyond his imagination. It had reminded people that no act of kindness is ever too small to matter. He took a deep breath, feeling grateful. Then he whispered softly to himself, maybe this was the purpose of that night, to remind people that even in a busy world, a kind heart can still make noise. And as he turned off the lights and walked home through the quiet streets, his footsteps echoed with calm certainty. The world had changed around him, but he remained steady. A gentle reminder that true kindness asks for nothing but leaves everything brighter behind it. The sun was warm that morning, painting the city in gold. The security guard stood at his usual post by the main gate, just as he had done for many years. His uniform was neatly pressed, and his smile carried that same calm warmth everyone had come to know. But this day was different. It was his last day on duty before retirement. The thought filled him with mixed emotions, a quiet pride and a touch of sadness. He had never thought his life would change the way it did. What began as a simple act of kindness had turned into something much bigger. Over the past year, his story had touched hearts across the world. People who had never met him spoke of him like an old friend. They said he reminded them of the goodness that still existed in people. Yet even after all the attention and recognition, he remained the same humble man who believed kindness didn't need cameras or crowds. That morning when he arrived at work, something felt unusual. The street outside the building was lined with people. At first he thought there was some kind of event happening nearby, but as he walked closer he realized those people were there for him. They held flowers, cards, and banners with words of thanks written in bright colors. Some faces he recognized: co-workers, delivery drivers, cleaners, and office staff. Others were strangers who had only heard his story online. The moment he stepped through the gate, a cheer rose from the crowd. Someone started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. The guard stood frozen for a second, completely taken aback. He had never seen so many people gathered just for him. One of his co-workers came forward with a gentle smile and said, "You thought we'd let you retire quietly? Not a chance." The guard chuckled softly, his eyes glistening. "You all didn't have to do this," he said, his voice slightly trembling. But they had, and they meant every bit of it. Inside the building, the management had prepared a small ceremony. The lobby was decorated with pictures, moments captured from his journey. There was the old photo of him standing with his umbrella over the delivery driver, the one that had gone viral. There were snapshots of him helping people cross the street, fixing a broken gate, sharing tea with the night staff, and even smiling at the camera with schoolchildren who had visited him to thank him for inspiring their kindness project. Seeing all those images together brought back memories he hadn't thought about in a while. When the company's director spoke, she said something that stayed with everyone. In a world that sometimes feels too busy and cold, this man reminded us that warmth doesn't come from wealth or fame. It comes from the heart. The room fell silent, then filled with applause. The guard lowered his head slightly, too shy to meet everyone's eyes, but a small tear rolled down his cheek. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but this moment was overwhelming. After the ceremony, people lined up to greet him. Each person wanted to shake his hand, take a photo, or simply say thank you. Some told him how his story had changed their lives. One young woman said she started volunteering at an elderly home after watching his video. A man said he forgave an old friend because the guard's story made him realize life was too short for bitterness. Even children told him how they started being kinder to their classmates because of what he did. Listening to them filled him with a quiet joy. He had never thought one small act could ripple through so many hearts. Later in the day, as the crowd thinned, the guard stepped outside for a walk. He went to the very spot by the gate where everything had begun, the place where he had once shared his umbrella and a cup of tea with a stranger. He looked at that patch of ground and smiled. It was strange how something so simple could start a chain of events that reached across the world. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "It really doesn't take much to make a difference." A soft breeze brushed past him, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the people still gathered behind him. He stood there for a while, just breathing in the moment. The sky had started turning orange, and the air smelled of the flowers people had brought. He felt peace, the kind that only comes when a person knows they've lived their life with purpose. Before he left for the last time, one of his young co-workers approached him with a small notebook. "Sir, could you write something in here?" the young man asked. "I want to keep your words with me." The guard smiled and took the notebook. He thought for a moment, then wrote in his careful handwriting, "Kindness costs nothing, but it's worth more than gold. Keep giving, even when no one's watching." He handed it back, and the young man nodded gratefully. As evening fell, the guard walked out through the gate one final time. The crowd clapped again, cheering as he waved goodbye. He didn't say much. He never had been one for big speeches. But his smile said enough. It carried warmth, gratitude, and the quiet pride of someone who had lived simply but left behind something timeless. As he walked down the street, people continued to wave, some even wiping their eyes. When he reached home, his family was waiting for him. His wife had cooked his favorite meal, and his children had decorated the small living room with balloons and a handwritten sign that said, "We're proud of you." He laughed softly, embracing them one by one. Sitting together that night, they talked about everything that had happened over the past year. The viral video, the interviews, the visitors who came just to meet him, and now the farewell celebration. His wife asked him what part of it meant the most to him. He thought for a moment, then said, "The best part wasn't the fame. It was knowing that people still care, that they still believe in kindness." After dinner, he stepped outside onto the small porch. The night was calm, the stars shining softly above. He looked up and smiled, feeling thankful for everything. The world could be noisy and harsh, but he had seen its gentle side, a side that people often forgot. And maybe, just maybe, his story had reminded them to see it again. The next morning, even though he no longer had to go to work, he woke up early out of habit. The city was still quiet. He made his tea, put on his old cap, and sat by the window. The world outside looked the same, busy, loud, rushing, but he knew something had changed. Not just in him, but in others too, because kindness once shared never truly fades. It lives on, passed from one heart to another. Weeks later, people were still talking about him online. Stories of kindness kept spreading. Someone started a community program in his name, offering free meals to workers who couldn't afford lunch. Another person began a kindness wall at their office where employees wrote down small good deeds they had done or witnessed. Each story connected back to that one rainy night, that one act that had seemed so ordinary at the time. Years later, the building where he once worked put up a small plaque near the gate. It read, "In memory of a humble guard whose simple kindness inspired millions." Every day, people passed by it. Some stopped to read. Others simply smiled as they remembered the man who had stood there with quiet dignity and an open heart. His story became part of the city's heartbeat, a gentle reminder that goodness doesn't need wealth, power, or grand gestures. Sometimes it just needs one person willing to care. And somewhere out there, when another rainy day comes and someone offers,